At the hospital, as Derek is fixed up after his wound, which luckily and conveniently missed every vein, nerve and artery, Mickey comforts Sydney, but then gives her food for thought.
Why would anyone go back in that house anyway?
Interesting. The next day, running through the evidence, Gail and Dewey manage to find a connection between the current victims and the victims of Woodsboro.
Is Cece the girl's real name?
No, it's Casey Cooper.
As in Casey Becker? As well as her boyfriend, Stephen Orth.
As in Phil Stevens.
Maureen Evans, Maureen Prescott. That's Sydney's mother.
I think you have a copycat on your hands, Chief.
This, however, really doesn't end up going anywhere, but it's a nice idea, I guess. We learn that Sydney is now under armed guard and protection from the precinct's best detectives. And at lunch, Mickey theorizes about Randy possibly being the killer. Sydney shows her lack of trust in Derek by not sitting down next to him when he pulls up a chair. And now begins the most painful scene of the movie. Worse than any kill. Worse than any amount of acting or death in any Saw film. I give you Jerry O'Connell singing.
To the room. I think I love you.
Don't do this.
I think I love you. Isn't that what life is made of? No, it worries me to say I've never felt this way. Hey, I think I love you so.
Oh, Jesus Christ. It's so bad and so out of place in this movie. And the worst bit is everyone applauds him. Maybe they're cheering that he finished, I don't know, but they still applaud him. You know, if somebody did that in my lunchroom, they would have been pelted with so much shit that they would have had to take a month off work just to let the bruises heal. Derek, in an attempt to show where his loyalty lies, gives Sydney a sorority necklace, which is apparently a big no-no with the brothers. But then I've never really understood that side of college life. At a separate location, we learn that Tori Spelling did end up playing Sydney in Stab.
Hey, so just think, if they make a movie about you, who's gonna play you? I shudder to think.
I see you as a young Meg Ryan myself.
Thanks, Dewey, with my luck I'd guess Tori Spelling.
And then we have a really fun conversation between Dewey and Randy in which they run through the suspects and the rules of horror sequels.
Number 1, the body count is always bigger. Number 2, the death scenes are always much more elaborate. More blood, more gore. Carnage, candy.
Suspects this time, as well as Dewey and Randy themselves, are listed from Randy as Hallie, Mickey, Derek, and even Gail, with Randy again using horror films to point out the reasons.
Mrs. Voorhees was a terrific serial killer, and there's always room for Candyman's daughter. She's sweet, she's deadly, she's bad for your teeth.
And for me, this is the kind of scene that shows that Jamie Kennedy was not only perfect for the role of Randy, but this is what sets Scream apart from any other horror franchise. The fact that these two can sit down and have this kind of conversation, and it doesn't feel out of place, is a testament to not only the writing and performance, but it's also the world that Williamson is writing in and the world he's created. The problem with this scene, I'll come to later. Back with Sydney, who feels completely lost and isolated with her life at the moment, sits and talks to her, I'm guessing the director of the play she's due to star in. The play, it turns out, is about the tragic Greek mythological figure Cassandra, and I'm sure there's a touch of symbolism there given Sydney's position in the film. Symbolism? No, I'm not doing it. Look, this video's already got 2 cameos in it, that's more than enough. If you want a video with cameos, go watch Panda Q&A.
Bleep, sausage, prostitute, popular, fun questions.
After this, of course. Sydney and her director Gus have a long conversation about Sydney's inner strength and his belief that she can't hide from her fate and should embrace it. This kind of scene always makes me wonder what fate Kevin Williamson eventually had planned for Sydney. Had he written Scream 3, as the scene does seem to point to a bigger picture, or a possible self-sacrifice for the Sydney character some way down the road. But again, I'm getting ahead of myself there. As the group runs through rehearsal, Sydney spots Ghostface in a circle of masked figures, appearing and disappearing quickly before she eventually runs into him and is thrown to the floor. When she looks up, it's simply a fellow cast member, leaving the question, was he actually there, or is she really starting to crack up? Backstage, waiting for a ride from Mickey, Derek appears, as Mickey had to edit, but Sydney is now in no mood to even trust Derek and asks him to back off and give her space. And reluctantly, he agrees. And now, I present the best, the worst, the most popular, and one of the most hated scenes in the Scream series. How can it be all those things? Watch your way. Back outside, Dewey, Gail, Randy and Joel are sitting and talking about who could be the killer, if the killer is repeating Woodsboro, and if there is a possible pattern. Gail keeps getting phone calls from somebody, and at the mention of her previous cameraman Kenny, Joel suddenly gets cold feet and leaves the 3 survivors to continue their conversation. Another call goes ignored until Randy answers it.
Gail's not here.
I'm not interrupting anything,
Telling Randy to keep the killer on the phone, Dewey and Gale spread out looking for someone on a cell phone. We get miscues, false camera points of views, and a steady slow build in tension as Randy searches the park.
What's your favorite scary movie?
Showgirls. Absolutely frightening.
All the time keeping the killer talking while Dewey and Gale attempt the same until they actually do spot someone on a phone. It's at this point the killer decides to target Randy's character in the horror mythos.
Why are you even here, Randy? You'll never be the leading man.
Fuck you!
No matter how hard you try, you'll never be the hero, and you'll never, ever get the girl.
Wait! Shit!
Which only serves to piss Randy off and causes him to launch into a tirade about Billy and Stu.
Dude was a pussy-ass wet rag. And Billy Loomis, what the fuck? Jesus! What a rat-looking, homo-repressed mama's boy.
Sadly, Randy does this with his back to Joel's news van, and Ghostface strikes, dragging him inside as a trio of beatboxers go past, muting Randy's screams and shouts as we hear him stabbed again and again before Ghostface departs. And notice, again, how quick this Ghostface appearance is. The caller Dewey and Gale stalked turned out to be, of course, an innocent, and now they notice Randy missing, and with the reappearance of Joel, they open the news van to find Randy's dead and bloody corpse. This scene is so good. There are no other words to describe it. Brilliantly written with the tension building and the musing pitched just right. Okay, I guess there are a lot of words that could describe it. But it was expertly handled and managed to shock pretty much everybody. I mean, watch the scene from the trailer.
You wanna be one of the big boys? Manson, Bundy, OJ?
And watch the scene again.
You wanna be one of the big boys? Huh? Manson, Bundy, OJ?
No one was expecting it. This happens at just the right time in the movie. You're at a point in the film where you almost feel comfortable as none of the surviving characters have been touched. And just when your walls have gone up, bang, one of them is killed off. It leaves a dark mood over the final parts of the film and leaves you feeling that now, anyone could go. The bad thing about this scene is that it comes at the expense of Randy. The whole feel and style of Scream at this point had come to depend on Randy's character input. And with his death, the series, as it stood, and this is, without me seeing Scream 4, loses a little bit of its identity. It's almost like the writers, producers, and even the director knew what a mistake they'd made because they bring Randy back for a Scream 3 in a cameo, and there was even talk about him actually being alive and that he'd only been wounded. Yeah, he looks a little bit more than wounded there, doesn't he? I mean, you only have to look at the trailers for Scream 4 to see that they're attempting to recreate the Randy character in this new generation. But Randy is dead, and now the shit is serious. A survivor is gone, and Sydney, at a computer in the library, gets an instant message announcing she's going to die tonight too. After removing her from the computer and putting her next to an open fucking doorway, Sydney is surprised by Cotton, who asks Sydney to take part in an interview with him, which will be conducted by Diane Sawyer. Sydney, who hates the press, refuses, and Cotton becomes confrontational, only to be arrested shortly after. Cotton, like Billy in the previous film, is released as the police have nothing on him, and now, finally, Gale drops the report a hard bitch act and shows she really is terrified. First snapping at Debbie and then being abandoned by Joel, she turns to Dewey as he is pretty much the only friend she has left. Realizing that the killer is enjoying this and should be at every crime scene, Dewey and Gale grab Joel's camera and head off to find a VCR. Why they couldn't just use one at the station I've never known. But they head into the college, eventually ending up in the theatre room, where they watch back footage Joel has been shooting through the entire film, including Dewey's rant against Gale.
You're a money-hungry, fame-seeking, and forgive me for saying mediocre writer.
Far from being offended though, Gale throws Dewey atop the desk and the two have a far more heated makeout session than they did in the first film, which only gets interrupted by some new footage featuring all the film's victims. It's when the footage focuses on them that they finally turn around. Ever the hero, Dewey heads up to the projection box only to find it empty.
There's no one there.
Down he's first. And now Ghostface is out in force. Dewey, thanks to his limp, falls down the stairs while Gale manages to fight off Ghostface with, ironically, a phone, before running through the college and ended up in a sound studio, just managing to avoid being seen by the killer. A tense scene follows as Gale manages to stay one step ahead of Ghostface before shutting herself in a soundproof booth, which sadly doesn't have a lock. Well, I'm just guessing by that reaction it doesn't have a lock. Safely tucked away and soundproofed, she doesn't hear Dewey enter the room and call out to her, nor does she hear him knocking on the glass trying to get her attention. Ghostface does though, and attacks, spearing Dewey from behind and stabbing him repeatedly while Gale can only watch in horror. Before Ghostface can continue his assault though, he spots Gale, forgets Dewey, and makes a beeline straight for her. Gale manages to save herself by pushing over a unit blocking Ghostface's entrance, and after a few really tense moments, Ghostface vanishes. Alright, I love this scene. Brilliant tension, brilliant music, brilliant direction, just brilliant. I really need a thesaurus. Back at the college, as Sydney and Hallie leave for an undisclosed location, Derek sees her off, promising that he will still be there when it's over. As Sydney drives away, a cloaked figure approaches Derek. But, far from being the killer, it turns out to be one of his sorority brothers, who are out to punish him for giving away his letters. That necklace thing. And from the looks of it, the punishment involves marking him with knives, tying him up and getting him drunk. How come I never found out about these things in uni? With the campus issuing a state locking, all the roads around the campus are deserted. This leads to another Ghostface attack, and he dispatches one of the detectives before assaulting the other and then climbing into the car. Clearing the car of the dead detective, Ghostface floors the accelerator, running over the second detective in the process. With the detective trying to get a shot off, Ghostface aims the car off-road and the car smashes into a collection of iron poles, one going right through the detective's skull.
Ooh, nasty.
So yeah, he's definitely dead. Sydney is the first to awaken from the collision and spots the killer unconscious in the front seat. Or is he? Yeah, he is. Or is he? Oh, I'll stop doing that now. Being a cop car, the two girls are sealed in the back and so have to resort to desperate measures to escape. Desperate measures involve pulling back the metal grate that separates them from Ghostface, at which point Sydney climbs through and is now sitting right next to the killer. Obviously scared out of her mind and unsure if he really is unconscious, Sydney reaches forward to pull off the mask.
Don't see it.
Cheap, but I liked it. Sydney decides, fuck it, and climbs over Ghostface and out of the car. But despite being outside, Hallie's door still won't open, and now Hallie needs to follow Sydney's lead and do the exact same thing. By this point, when I originally watched this film, I kept saying to myself, oh, he's definitely going to get up now. He's really going to wake up now. But amazingly, Hallie gets out of the car too. The two girls run off, but Sydney hesitates and heads back, wanting to know who's under the mask. Why? Why didn't she just pull the mask off when they were outside the car? Returning, she finds the seat empty, and before anyone can react, Ghostface attacks, and with Sydney helpless to stop, he stabs Hallie to death before pursuing Sydney back to the campus. I have such a problem with the payoff for this scene. The only thing that lets it down is its climax. The characters are so smart until the very end, which hurts it a little in my opinion. Why not pull the mask off there? Why run away and then come back? I mean, they do try to cover it by having the window open on the far side of the car to show where he got out, but the payoff for this scene, especially the way it was shot, it's so predictable. As soon as you see this shot, you know he's going to jump out. Back at the college, Gale emerges from her hiding place only to run into a blood-covered Cotton who claims he was trying to help Dewey. Frantic, she runs outside, snatching the phone off Debbie and calls the police, believing Cotton is the actual killer. Back at another location of the college, Sydney hears music coming from the drama studio, and even though no one is around, she runs onto the stage calling loudly. Now this is what I meant when I said the climax felt a little off to me. It just feels like they're having to strip Sydney of all her smarts to make it all work, which goes against everything we've come to know about her for the last two films. Sealed on stage by the set scenery, she's startled as Derek drops from the rafters, unconscious and gagged after his punishment from the brothers. As Sydney attempts to release him, Ghostface approaches, slowly and deliberately, and unmasks himself, revealing the killer to be Mickey.
Surprise, Sydney.
Yeah, I expected that. No, I wasn't impressed. Now, I do like Timothy Olyphant, and I thought he was great in the movie Go, but here, he's playing it too over the top, and trying to come across as too crazy. It's one of the reasons I love Skeet Ulrich's portrayal as Billy. He starts out calm and gets madder and madder as the scene goes on, and by the end he's a raving lunatic. But it's believable. With Mickey, not so much. Mickey, doing what he's been doing through the whole movie, begins messing with Sydney's head, and claims Derek has been helping him the whole time, and berates Derek for getting himself tied up, leaving him all alone for the night. Derek desperately tries to convince Sydney of his innocence, but before anything can be decided, Mickey shoots Derek fatally, allowing Sydney a final moment to apologise for not trusting him before he dies. This leads to Mickey giving us his motive, and surprisingly, he's fucking nuts, and it also leads to him announcing his intended defence.
I'm gonna blame the movies
Sydney doesn't like this and lets Mickey know, holding her own until he draws a knife and a gun. Cheap bastard. The raise of Derek's body suddenly signals the arrival of Mickey's partner in crime. And now it's time for the big reveal. Gail? The reporter?
Mrs. Loomis?
Billy's mother.
What a twist!
I like it. It's got a nice Friday the 13th ring to it. However, the same problem I have with Mickey being the killer is the one I have with Mrs. Loomis. Laurie plays the role too over the top. I mean, look at her eyes. Do they really need to be that wide? It becomes more comical than it does scary. You know exactly what she's going to do. She starts calm and then goes crazy with no real build. Again, with Billy and Skeet's portrayal of the character, they got it just right, and that's why he's still my favourite Ghostface. Loomis, being the insane bitch that she is, decides that the blame the movies motive is a load of old bullshit, and she doesn't really need Mickey anymore, and shoots him, which leads to Mickey letting off a single shot that connects with Gail's ribs, sending her toppling off the stage and out of sight, leaving us with Sydney against Mrs. Loomis. After some really hammy over-the-top acting in which Mrs. Loomis admits to killing Randy, blames Sydney and her mother for the destruction of her family and the death of her son, Sydney has enough of the eyeball monster, clocks her with a bottle and then goes special effects crazy with the scenery. I just love Nave's little smile here. It's a mixture of both psychotic and enjoyment. Sydney goes to town on the levers with an axe, pretty much destroying the staging in the process, and manages to trap Mrs. Loomis under a pile of staged bricks. Heading to the exit though, Sydney's ambushed in yet another fairly predictable scene as Loomis goes absolutely batshit crazy now, pinning Sydney down and pressing the knife closer to her face. Before she can connect, a gunshot announces the arrival of Cotton, who clearly has no idea what's going on. Sydney introduces Mrs. Loomis, the killer, and what I love about Lee's performance here is he's actually more annoyed that this woman isn't a reporter. The bargaining gets laid down with Mrs. Loomis begging Cotton to let her kill Sydney.
She sent you to prison for a year. Personally, I think it's rather poetic.
Cotton holds the one thing over Sydney that he has for her to take, the interview with Diane Sawyer, suggesting that if she takes the interview, she's safe. Now, I wonder which one she'll choose.
Consider it done.
Ah, what a hero. Cotton shoots Mrs. Loomis and then gets the scare of his life from Gail, who despite a gunshot wound is still alive. Looking down at the dead body of Mrs. Loomis, taking Randy's last words from Scream 1 into account, Mickey revives, only to get the hell shot out of him. Not taking any chances, Sydney places a bullet right between Mrs. Loomis's eyes. In the aftermath, we see Joel, being the actual smart man, return after the killings and hands the microphone back to Gail, hoping to get the scoop. Amazingly though, Dewey is still alive and being wheeled out on a gurney. Unlike the first film though, this time Gail abandons her reporting duties and goes with Dewey to the emergency room, which is a really nice little touch and shows the growth of their characters through this film.
I'm coming with you.
Sydney, meanwhile, in her debt to Cotton, proclaims him the hero and passes the torch of attention over to him before walking off alone. And that's Scream 2. Now I know I nitpicked about a lot more things in this one than I did Scream 1, but I do prefer Scream 2 in the series. And I think it's mainly because of some of the scenes I pointed out there, but also the energy the film seems to have and the chemistry the actors all have together. Plus, it left the door open for a sequel. And 3 years later, we got Scream 3. I'm parched. I've got to go out there.
Serious Looper.